Greetings from ADK Wealth Advisory Group, St. Louis office. After hours, Friday, November 6th. Dan Davis, ADK Wealth Advisory Group President and co-founder, and at Financial Planning World co-founder. Whether you vote blue, red, or independent, I want to congratulate you for showing up. At this stage in our republic's history, voices needed to be heard, and they certainly were. COVID, like everything this particular calendar year, has thrown a wrench into everything, and we had 100 million pre-election votes. I had the fine pleasure of being one of those, and my daughter Mia, who turned 18 this year, joined me. I was very flattered that she came and asked if I would take her to the polls. It really stems from a family value that was sown with my mother's mother, Grandma Annie. She worked at the polls as long as I could remember until her health wouldn't permit anymore. Her father, my great-grandfather, Ryan, was in the Missouri State House of Representatives. So to say the DNA characteristic is working through with my kids is important to me, whether or not they vote the way I vote or not, that they get out and vote. So what we're doing today in our post-election market update is we're going to start with the politics, looking at the White House, Congress, mostly Senate, then go to stimulus, financial markets, the economy, and wrap up with central banks, put it all together, talk about what we know right now, what we are thinking about, and then what it means to you. So let's start with what we know. As you may recall from my last market update, it was titled Financial Markets in the 2020 Election. I mentioned that the 60 Minutes episode I watched, a variety of other things, The Economist, were leading me to believe that there would be delays. And that's exactly what we have. What we know right now in the White House is we know on that front that Biden has a very strong lead. It is unlikely that Trump will be able to catch him. President Trump has already started and will probably do more court cases, fighting different parts of the way votes were counted, et cetera. All of that said, it's fairly unlikely that Biden would not be victorious. On the Senate side, the Wall Street Journal, November 4th, had an article, and they commented that the Senate had a 53 to 47 Republican lead in seats. That in order for the Senate to turn blue, that the Republicans would have to cede 4 seats if Trump won, 3 seats if Biden won. What we know right now is that the Democrats have gained 1. They won in Colorado, Arizona, but then they lost in Alabama. We also know that the Republicans were able to hold in battlegrounds in Maine, South Carolina, as well as Iowa. What we know is still up in the air is North Carolina. They'll be counting votes through November 14th. Alaska, they'll be counting votes through November 10th. And then Georgia, which appears to have a runoff that's going to take place January 5th. Statistically speaking, and everything I read leads me to believe that the Senate will stay in the control of the Republicans. And while in the House the Republicans have gained seats, they have not gained enough to be able to move the Democrats out of the control position. So what I would classify it as is a split government. And when we talk about what that means to financial markets, historically, in a presidential election year, the month September, month October, super volatile. This year they were choppy, but not nearly as negative, nor as volatile as I would have expected with as contentious as this election appeared to be. We also saw that the day before the election, Monday, that the markets went up, and then up quite a bit the day of the election, and then followed suit the remaining part of the week with Wednesday and Thursday being very strong. The interesting thing for me on markets, most people didn't notice, and that is the night of in the futures market. So at the beginning, when the narrative was the blue wave, then the futures contracts were just really very bullish because they were talking $3 trillion of fiscal stimulus. By late evening, early morning, the blue tide had become a non-starter, and the futures market tanked. Actually, in the NASDAQ market, the circuit breaker hit shutting the market off, which I didn't read that anywhere. If I hadn't got up at 3 in the morning to check and see what was going on, I wouldn't even know it occurred. But then again, Wednesday and Thursday were very strong days. The fixed income market, just like with the blue wave, the interest rates went up. When that became a non-starter, popped back down, so the net effect is interest rates dropped. What this means in stimulus is LPL's research team believes if the government split, like I alluded to, that is the most high probability scenario, that we're probably looking at $1 trillion of stimulus, which is still a big number, but not the $3 trillion or even 1.7 that you're hearing. The big unknown is when. Will it happen in the lame duck period? Will it happen after inauguration? I don't think anyone really knows the answer to that. When I take a look at the economy, unemployment just fell through the floor with the recession, and then it came back pretty quickly to a certain level, and then it's below where we started, and it's been very persistent at increasing, but at a very, very low rate. And we believe that that will continue. Probably the thing that's the biggest surprise to me is corporate earnings. At this point, the S&P, 80% of the companies have reported. 86% of them have beat expectations, and the average beat rate's 19%. Better than what most would have expected, to say the least. But again, there's this huge disparity, bifurcation between the big companies and the workers who can work at home, who have kept their jobs, and then the mom and pop restaurants, the service providers, that those jobs either have not come back or come back at a really slow rate. It's that part that's going to be persistent and nagging and very slow in the recovery. The Fed, the central banks throughout the world, have been super accommodative, but they're really saying it's now time for the governments to step in with this next level of fiscal stimulus. It's not going to come from the monetary side. What surprised me was how early the markets started to anticipate and how robust they were before we really had some decent probabilities on things, and how different the narratives were. One day the narrative was blue tide and the markets rolled up with that. As soon as that twisted, you would have thought the markets would pull back with a different narrative, but they just kept going. And none of the narratives really meshed. And when I've seen that in the past, what it really means is that there's no narrative that explains the run other than the animal spirit of the financial markets, and that the bull's on the run. And we believe that that will continue. And what we really expect going forward and what it means to you. We've talked at length over the last decades about how we view risk management. And we think of the economic cycle in using where we believe we're at as a way to determine how much equity exposure we want. So you have early economic stage, mid, late, and end. And end is where you have a recession. We believe that that happened very swiftly and brutally this year. The data would cause us to believe research-wise that we are at a slow recovery point, so that we're at the early stage of the next economic cycle. Anytime you're there, the biggest risk is some kind of a shock that sets you back into a double dip. And what we have done for our clients is we've decreased some of our less volatile non-equity positions and increased our equity positions. And the reason that we've done that is we believe that we're through the worst of it. One never knows, which is why investment has risk associated with it. But we will be very diligent in our research and making sure that we're doing our best for your family. So, divided government, delays, markets are responding well, package all that up, and it's a very serious time in our country. So I figured I would end on a not so serious note. Alluded earlier to the fact that Mia and I went and voted together. When I got home, I had noticed that she had a family email string with her sisters. She included me, and she was telling them that she went and voted with Dad. And the long Long and short of it is Morgan asked her who she voted for, and I had already been told who she voted for, and she said Kanye West, and that was not who I was told. So I'm told that that was a joke, and that who I was originally informed is accurate, and her sister Morgan still thinks she voted for Kanye West. I'm reminded of something that is really real within our society right now, and that is just how divided as a nation we are. If you think about the united we stand, divided we fall, we really need to come together. I ask for your prayers for our nation, that as this election settles and we move to this next season, that we would move away from the divide and the narrative of hate and towards a way of unifying as Americans versus thinking of it as blue and red. Think of us as red, white, and blue. Signing off from St. Louis. Appreciate your time.